Jesus told lots of interesting stories. Here's one from the book of Matthew 25. Are you ready for God's kingdom? Listen to this story. It'll help you understand. Everyone was excited about the wedding party. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to wait for the time for the wedding party to enter. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no extra oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. The groom was delayed, and as they waited, everyone became tired and fell asleep. Late at night, there came a shout. Look, everyone's finally here. We can begin the celebration. Then all the bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the wise replied, No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves. And while they went to buy it, the rest of the wedding party arrived, and those who were ready went together into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the other bridesmaids returned, but the door was locked and they could not enter the party. Keep awake, therefore you cannot predict the future.
Keep awake, therefore, for you can't predict the future. It's almost as if Jesus was speaking about 2020. This week has been as full of upheaval as any this year. The United States had a presidential election this week. It took them 4 days to declare a winner. And even so, there will likely now be weeks and weeks of recounts and lawsuits and runoffs and uncertainty and maybe chaos of one kind or another. Control of their Senate is not yet clear. There's more elections to be held. My favorite tweet of the week came from Stephen Colbert, who asked, anybody know what to do when your democracy does this? And then he posted a picture of that little wheel that goes around and round on your computer as content is buffering. And all you can do is sit and wait. So to the south of us, there is a nation of, to use the metaphor from the Bible reading we just heard, bridesmaids with their lamps waiting for something or someone to show up and be truly definitive. Closer to home, after only a week of adjusting to the fact that we were categorized in restricted orange level with public health guidelines and successive days of positive COVID cases in our region, tomorrow we move into restricted red. Again, there is this sense of waiting for all of this to be done. And similar to, I think, that the American political situation, maybe wondering in some parts of our brains whether this is ever going to be done. And as is our tradition, these Sunday mornings, we look for a wisdom word to guide us. The scripture reading seems very appropriate and timely, but I'm not exactly sure what the wisdom is for us. It might be easy, for example, to look at this story and say, well, clearly it's time to start buying toilet paper again, or some other supply that we are afraid of running out of. But if we learned anything in the spring, it's that panic buying didn't help or heal anyone. And it's because of what we saw in the world when that run on toilet paper was happening that I don't really like what I hear in this Bible story. Is this really how we would define a wise person? As someone who doesn't share their oil but only looks after herself? And what about those poor ones who are called foolish because they weren't prepared? Well, technically, they were prepared. They had what they needed. It was somebody else who was late. And how is it their fault that they didn't bring a whole bunch extra than what they needed? On many other occasions, Jesus cautions his followers from hoarding or worrying too much about what's going to come next in the future. Not to mention his constant refrains about forgiveness. Where is the grace in this story for those who had to run off and get more oil for their lamps? We can wait for the groom, but not for the rest of the wedding party? I've been wondering lately if Jesus didn't tell this story as an ideal to strive for. This is not about the world as it should be, but maybe a reminder of the world as it was. Maybe it was a reminder of the kind of world we find ourselves in, because we know too well the truth that we know neither the day nor the hour when the unexpected disrupts our life. And yet we persist in believing it should be possible to plan for all the unexpecteds, don't we? You know, the Reverend Dr. Anna Carter Florence said about this story, "I don't much like those smarmy bridesmaids who showed up with their own extra flasks and don't share. But the truth is, I recognize them. And if they were running for office, I'd probably vote for them." We want those in office to be prepared for everything, don't we? Still, I really don't think that this story is about storing up oil for a rainy day. That doesn't fit with anything else we know about Jesus. It's only a few verses later in Matthew that Jesus says, "Remember what you do for the least of these, you do for me." So, what if it's not about how much you have, but what you carry with you? In this world where all you can reasonably expect is that your expectations will be turned upside down at some point. And someone who is wise knows that you need something in your lamp to keep you going when things go as you don't expect. See, ironically, what we need to prepare for are all of those kinds of moments that it is impossible to prepare for. But it's in those moments that you need to have something to draw on. And it isn't going to come from your pension savings, and it isn't going to come from your good intentions and your long-range plans. You can't check it out from the library or borrow it from your neighbor. It's going to come from whatever it is that fuels your spirit. And that might be particularly tough right now. You might be feeling low and struggling to figure out what it is that enables God's love and mercy and compassion to continue to shine forth in your life like a lamp in the night. Or, what if? What if the story isn't only about staying fueled up? Although it does present us a lot to think about in that regard, and we do know that Jesus' stories were often simply to get people talking about their world and looking at it through new eyes. But what Jesus says when he finishes this story is not, "Okay, now go home and check your oil supplies." What he says is, "Keep awake, because you can't predict the future." I don't know about you, but lately I have been feeling that desire to just close my eyes, to shut out the world until whatever is bothering me is just gone. But time doesn't stop just because our activities do. The world doesn't stop turning because we're asked to stay at home. And when we are closing our eyes to everything around us, it is also possible that we might just be closing our eyes to something God is up to. We can stop our lives and just wait for the changes that'll work with the plans we had in place. Or we can take a deep breath and adjust our lives to the world as it is and figure out how to do that with integrity. That's the preparedness we need. I kind of wonder what might have happened if those bridesmaids hadn't fallen asleep as they waited. Would they have noticed what was happening to their fuel and that it was running low so that they could find a way to adjust? Maybe not. Maybe it would have simply increased their anxiety as they started to worry about not having enough and when are they going to come and Then again, maybe they would have had some time to make a sharing arrangement, if you will, with somebody who'd brought some extra. Maybe they would blow out one of their lamps, save that oil, share what they had, so that all the lamps could be lit when it was time. Those kinds of agreements and problem solving can't happen in the moment, can they? They need time. And those options really only exist in our imaginations. They don't show up in the story itself. But maybe, what if that's some of the preparation that Jesus is inviting his followers to think about? That imagination space. When things fall apart or are different than we expect, do we have the resources, the imagination to make shifts without abandoning who we are and what is really important to us? That has very little to do with supplies, doesn't it? It has everything to do with outlook or approach. Today, the word we often use for that is resilience. Weebles. Did you ever have those toys? Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Or maybe you just bounce back up. Once upon a time, there were several workers in a construction site. And a bystander asked each of them what they were up to. And the first one said, "I'm laying bricks." The second one said, "I'm making a buck." And the third one replied, "I'm building a cathedral." Which of the three do you suspect is most resilient, or would be most resilient? There are lots of factors, so I'm going to have to make a few assumptions. But perhaps to the first two, if the project changed, they might not mind so much one way or the other. You could argue that they would be the ones best prepared for a change in plans. On the other hand, if the job and the bricks disappeared, and the rug was completely pulled out beneath them, I wonder if in fact it would be the third who might have the personal resources to find a way forward. Sometimes it's about what you're looking for and what you're willing to see. Well, in a chaotic and clearly changing world, as we move back into a time with as much staying home as possible, and I continue to look for wisdom in our stories, what I hear are questions for us. In this world in which we live, which is clearly chaotic and unfair and strange, will we close our eyes and choose denial? Will we pay attention but simply be resigned? Will we find resilience? Find a way to light our lamps even when the fuel supply appears to be limited? Perhaps the wisest among us will start to figure out alternative fuel sources so that we can continue to let God's light shine. As we ponder these things, I realize that one of the advantages of not having a congregation here in person right now is that I can end by reminding you of a song. It's a spiritual, but it goes with this story. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning, keep your lamps trimmed and burning, keep your lamps trimmed and burning, for the time is drawing nigh.